Have you ever found yourself staring into the void, questioning the meaning of your existence in a world that often seems indifferent to our deepest yearnings? What if I told you that life, in its most profound truth, is inherently meaningless? That's right, Albert Camus, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, argues that the very search for meaning in life is the root of our existential struggle. But here's the twist. Instead of succumbing to despair, Camus invites us to embrace this absurdity, to live fully, and to create our own meaning despite the odds. In this video, we're diving deep into Camus' philosophy of the absurd, an exploration that's not just academic, but intensely practical in today's world. Whether you're dealing with the pressure of achieving success, battling existential doubts, or simply trying to make sense of life's twists and turns, this philosophy can offer powerful insights into how we can navigate the chaos of existence and find joy even when life doesn't provide the answers we expect. Imagine this. Life is a journey without a clear destination. The universe is indifferent to your struggles, your desires, and your efforts. But what if that's not something to be feared, but something to be embraced? In today's fast-paced world, where we often feel overwhelmed by expectations, is it possible to find peace by simply accepting the absurdity of life? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Before we jump into the core of this philosophy, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready to challenge your understanding of life. Subscribe for more thought-provoking content like this, and share this video with anyone who could use a fresh perspective on life's meaning. And if you feel moved by the ideas in this video, please consider showing your support with a super thanks. Your contribution helps us keep creating meaningful content that challenges the status quo and sparks important conversations. Let's get started. Albert Camus, a towering figure in 20th century philosophy and literature, is best known for his exploration of the absurdity of human existence. Camus didn't view life as a journey toward an inevitable or predetermined purpose. Instead, he embraced the uncomfortable reality that life is inherently meaningless. This stark outlook forms the core of his philosophy, known as the absurd. The absurd, as Camus articulates in his works, arises from the tension between our human desire for meaning and the universe's indifference to such desires. The search for purpose, he argues, often leads us to confront an uncomfortable paradox. In a vast, uncaring universe, meaning is nowhere to be found. Yet, in the face of this cosmic void, Camus proposes an unexpected response, not resignation, but rebellion. This central paradox that Camus presents forces us to question the very nature of existence. If life is truly meaningless, why do we continue to strive for significance? Why do we pursue love, success, or knowledge if, in the grand scheme of things, it all amounts to nothing? Camus invites us to confront this dilemma directly. He challenges us to ask the question, if life has no inherent meaning, what then becomes our reason for continuing to live? It's a question that resonates deeply with modern audiences who often wrestle with the pressures of purpose-driven living in a world that seems increasingly chaotic and uncertain. Camus was not the first philosopher to confront the meaninglessness of life. Yet, what distinguishes him from others is his unwavering commitment to embracing this lack of meaning without falling into nihilism. Whereas many might be driven to despair by the notion that there is no grand, overarching purpose, Camus saw freedom in this realization. His philosophy was not a resignation to meaninglessness, but rather an invitation to create one's own meaning within a world that offers none. In his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus introduces the metaphor of Sisyphus, a figure from Greek mythology condemned to roll a boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down, repeating the process for eternity. This endless struggle with no ultimate purpose mirrors the human condition. Yet, rather than succumbing to despair, Camus famously concludes that one must imagine Sisyphus happy. In the absence of meaning, it is through the struggle itself, not the outcome, that Sisyphus finds his purpose. This paradoxical assertion invites us to reconsider how we approach the concept of purpose in a world that does not offer clear answers. Camus proposes that the very act of living authentically and fully, even in the face of the absurd, can imbue our lives with meaning. The tension between our craving for meaning and the universe's indifference lies at the heart of what Camus calls the absurd. This is the existential conflict that we all face. The unyielding desire to find significance in our lives colliding with the harsh reality that the world itself is not predisposed to provide it. Yet, it is through this very recognition of absurdity that we are presented with a unique freedom, the freedom to define our own purpose. It is this conflict that Camus examines throughout his work, and this is where his philosophy becomes particularly powerful for contemporary readers. The absurd arises from the contradiction between two fundamental realities. First, our desire for order, understanding, and meaning. And second, the universe's fundamental silence in response to these desires. The human experience, then, is defined by this gap between our yearning for purpose and the universe's inability or unwillingness to provide it. This creates an existential crisis for many, as the search for meaning can often feel futile in the face of such overwhelming indifference. But Camus rejects the idea that the only response to this absurdity is despair. Instead, he calls for a rebellion, a form of resistance against the absurd by acknowledging it without surrendering to it. Camus' idea of rebellion is not about denying the absurdity of life, but about accepting it fully and choosing to live authentically despite it. This rebellion involves embracing life, with all its inherent chaos and uncertainty, and finding personal meaning in the midst of it. For Camus, this rebellion does not involve attempting to impose meaning where there is none, but instead involves a refusal to succumb to despair. Instead, it means finding joy, beauty, and purpose in the struggle itself. It is the act of living in defiance of the universe's indifference that allows individuals to find their own significance. This philosophy resonates particularly with individuals today, as we live in an era where uncertainty, existential questions, and questions of identity seem more prominent than ever. The pressures of modern life often lead us to question the purpose of our work, relationships, and even our own existence. Many people find themselves grappling with the overwhelming feeling that life, in its entirety, lacks a clear direction. And yet, despite this, the search for meaning persists. From personal fulfillment to social change, the pursuit of purpose remains central to how we live. But in a world where meaning is not guaranteed, how do we cope? Camus suggests that rather than search for meaning from external sources, be it religion, societal norms, or material success, we should turn inward and find meaning through our actions, values, and relationships. Meaning is not something to be found in the world, but something we create for ourselves through the choices we make and the lives we lead. This kind of personal, internal meaning stands in stark contrast to the more conventional approaches to purpose that demand an external, objective justification for life's value. In Camus' view, meaning is not something bestowed upon us, but something we have the freedom to create as we live. One powerful example of how this plays out in real life can be seen through the stories of individuals who, despite facing significant challenges or tragedies, are able to find profound meaning in their experiences. Take, for example, the story of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. Frankl wrote about his experiences in his book Man's Search for Meaning, where he describes how, even in the most harrowing of circumstances, he found meaning in his suffering. Frankl's approach aligns with Camus' idea of rebellion against the absurd, by creating a sense of purpose even in the face of overwhelming despair. Frankl exemplifies Camus' notion of living authentically despite life's meaninglessness. Similarly, many modern individuals have found profound meaning in their lives despite, or perhaps because of the chaos of the world around them. Take, for example, the artist who continues to create without any hope of fame or financial success. The act of creation itself becomes their form of rebellion against the absurd. They may never know if their work will have any lasting significance, yet they continue to create, finding joy and meaning in the process rather than the outcome. This defiance of the universe's indifference is an embodiment of Camus' philosophy. The ultimate challenge of Camus' philosophy is not to deny the absurd but to embrace it. This doesn't mean we should abandon the search for meaning. Rather, it means that we must create our own meaning in a world that provides none. It's a profound challenge to find fulfillment in the absence of any grand purpose, but it is also incredibly liberating. If there is no ultimate meaning in the universe, then the possibilities for how we live are boundless. We are free to create our own purpose through our actions, our relationships, and our pursuits. In this way, Camus offers a philosophy that is not about giving up, but about actively creating meaning where none exists. It's a philosophy of empowerment, encouraging us to live authentically and embrace life with all its uncertainty and unpredictability. While the absurdity of life can seem daunting, it also frees us from the constraints of imposed meaning. And in that freedom, we can find our own path. In the end, Camus' philosophy is not one of despair, but one of defiance. The world may be indifferent, but in that very indifference, we find the freedom to create our own significance. By rejecting the need for external validation and embracing the absurd, we can live more fully and authentically. If life is indeed meaningless, it is up to us to give it meaning. And in doing so, we rebel not against the world, but against the limits it imposes on us, choosing instead to live on our own terms. In Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, one of the most profound and defining ideas he presents is the concept of the absurd, a term he uses to describe the tension between the human desire for meaning and the inherent meaninglessness of the universe. Camus delves deeply into this notion of the absurd, where the universe, indifferent to human concerns, provides no inherent purpose or justification for existence. At the heart of this absurdity is a stark contradiction. Human beings are driven by an insatiable need to find meaning, yet the universe offers no such meaning, only silence. This creates a deep existential conflict, as our natural inclination to seek purpose constantly collides with the indifferent, purposeless reality in which we exist. Camus' exploration of this absurdity is embodied in the figure of Sisyphus, a character from Greek mythology condemned to roll a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down every time he reaches the top, forcing him to repeat the task for eternity. This punishment, without any prospect of finality or success, serves as the central metaphor in Camus' philosophy. It represents the endless human struggle for meaning in a world that refuses to offer any. Sisyphus' plight is the perfect illustration of the absurd condition of human existence. No matter how hard he strives, no matter how far he pushes the stone, there is no higher purpose, no ultimate achievement, only an endless cycle of effort that leads nowhere. The absurdity of existence, as Camus articulates it, is not a concept meant to depress or discourage. Rather, it's a recognition of a fundamental truth about human life. The search for meaning is inherent in our nature, but it is futile when measured against the vast, indifferent cosmos. This does not mean that our efforts are worthless, but rather that they exist within a universe that simply doesn't care. We strive, we seek, and yet we are confronted with the reality that there is no grand purpose or higher meaning. This is what Camus calls the absurd. To fully grasp the weight of this absurdity, consider the modern human condition. We live in a world where the pursuit of meaning has been central to our lives, whether it's through religious beliefs, career aspirations, relationships, or personal achievements. Society often emphasizes the importance of finding one's purpose, of contributing to something larger than ourselves. Yet for many, This search ultimately leads to feelings of emptiness. Whether we look at the vastness of the universe or the transience of human life, it becomes clear that the meaning we seek may never be found in the way we expect. Life's fundamental question, what is the purpose, remains unanswered, much like the fruitless labor of Sisyphus. This is the essence of the absurd. One of the most poignant aspects of Camus' philosophy is the recognition that while the universe may be indifferent, human beings continue to search for meaning. This paradox is essential to understanding the absurd. On the one hand, the universe provides no inherent meaning. It simply is. On the other hand, human beings are hardwired to seek purpose and significance in their lives. This tension, this constant pull between the desire for meaning and the absence of it, is what Camus describes as absurdity. In his essay, Camus argues that the proper response to this absurdity is not despair but defiance. He believes that once we fully acknowledge the meaninglessness of life, we are liberated to create our own meaning. This is where Camus differs from many other existential philosophers who see the realization of life's meaninglessness as a source of nihilism or despair. For Camus, the acknowledgement of absurdity does not lead to resignation. Instead, it opens up the possibility for a more authentic way of living. If there is no inherent meaning to be found in the universe, then it is up to the individual to create meaning in their own life. This is the rebellion that Camus speaks of, a rebellion not against the absurd, but in full recognition of it. In this sense, the absurdity of existence is not something to be overcome or eliminated, but rather something to be embraced and confronted head-on. This idea of embracing the absurdity of life, rather than shying away from it, can be difficult to grasp. In our culture, we are often taught that life must have meaning, that we must find our purpose, or we will be lost. We look for answers in religion, in philosophy, in science, in relationships, anywhere we can. But Camus insists that we must face the reality that no matter how much we seek meaning, it is unlikely we will ever find it in a way that satisfies our deepest existential questions. And yet, in this realization, there is a kind of freedom. The search for meaning becomes a personal journey, something we create for ourselves rather than something imposed by an external source. The idea of the absurd can be compared to the everyday human experience of feeling overwhelmed by the pressures of life and the constant search for significance. Consider a student in a university. For example, they may spend years working toward a degree, believing that it will lead them to success and fulfillment. However, once they graduate, they may find that the degree itself does not provide the deep sense of purpose they anticipated. The pursuit of knowledge and the idea of education as a means of personal growth can feel meaningless once the expected outcome, success, recognition, a sense of accomplishment, proves to be elusive. This feeling of emptiness, despite hard work and dedication, reflects the absurdity Camus describes. The student's journey mirrors that of Sisyphus. The effort is real, the struggle is palpable, but in the end, the final goal remains as elusive as ever. Furthermore, the absurd condition can also be observed in more existential moments, such as the experience of a midlife crisis. Individuals may have spent years climbing the corporate ladder or working toward personal goals, only to find themselves questioning the meaning of their efforts once they reach the top. The goals they thought would provide lasting fulfillment seem hollow, and the very thing they spent their lives working toward feels increasingly insignificant. This sense of futility is a direct manifestation of the absurd. Like Sisyphus, the individual in the midst of a midlife crisis finds themselves on a never-ending quest, pushing a metaphorical boulder up the hill, only for it to roll back down. But Camus does not suggest that we should abandon our pursuit of meaning altogether. Instead, he urges us to continue living fully, even in the face of absurdity. The key to understanding the absurd is not to shy away from the struggle, but to engage with it, knowing that it is futile. It's still finding joy in the effort itself. For Camus, The process of living our choices, our actions, our relationships is what gives life value, even if that value is not bestowed from some external source. In this way, we become like Sisyphus, embracing the struggle, pushing the boulder up the hill, not because we believe the task will ultimately be completed, but because the task itself is a form of expression of our existence. The image of Sisyphus pushing the rock, tirelessly and without hope of success, represents more than just despair. It represents the human condition as Camus saw it, a struggle that will never end, but a struggle that is worth engaging with. There is a beauty, a nobility, in continuing to live and strive despite the inherent meaninglessness of life. The absurdity is not a reason to stop, but rather a reason to continue. In accepting the absurd, we can find a kind of freedom from the need for an overarching purpose. Freedom to create our own meaning within the confines of a world that offers none. The absurdity of existence, therefore, is not something to fear or resist, but something to confront directly. It is through this confrontation that we can find the courage to live authentically, to create our own purpose, and to engage with the world on our own terms. The absurdity is not a trap, but a challenge, one that, when accepted, opens the door to a more liberated way of living. In this sense, Sisyphus, in his eternal struggle, can be seen as a symbol of the human spirit, resilient, determined, and unyielding in the face of an indifferent universe. In his exploration of the human condition, Albert Camus emphasizes a concept that stands in stark contrast to the despair one might expect in the face of life's inherent meaninglessness. This concept is rebellion not as a rejection of life itself, but as a defiant acceptance of the absurdity of existence. For Camus, rebellion is not about futilely attempting to impose meaning on a world that does not offer it. Rather, it is about acknowledging the absurd and continuing to live authentically in spite of it. Camus' call to rebellion is a form of defiance against a universe that offers no inherent purpose, yet still demands that we continue to exist and engage with it. This defiance is not born of anger or nihilism, but from the very realization that life is without objective meaning. It is a rebellion that embraces life as it is, without resorting to escape into illusions or false hopes. Camus' view of rebellion is articulated in the myth of Sisyphus, where he uses the image of Sisyphus, condemned to endlessly push a boulder up a hill only for it to roll back down again, as a metaphor for human existence. The struggle that Sisyphus endures is pointless. Yet Camus argues that in the very acknowledgement of this futility lies a form of rebellion. This rebellion is not about fighting against the absurdity, but about accepting it fully and continuing to live regardless. The key to Camus' philosophy is the idea that meaning does not need to be imposed on life. Instead, meaning is created through our actions and our engagement with the world, even if we know those actions will never lead to an ultimate purpose. Rebellion, in Camus' terms, is not about attempting to escape from absurdity, but about confronting it head-on and finding the strength to live in a way that transcends it. The rebellious spirit that Camus describes is inherently tied to the notion of authenticity. In a world that offers no objective meaning, it is through living authentically that we create our own purpose. Authenticity in this sense means living in accordance with one's true self, free from the constraints imposed by society or external expectations. Camus calls on individuals to live with full awareness of the absurdity of existence, to confront it without flinching, and to continue living in a way that is true to oneself, even when that life is devoid of the assurances that many people seek. For many people, the rebellious spirit that Camus advocates may seem foreign or even frightening. In a society that often demands conformity, living authentically can feel like an act of rebellion in itself. Society teaches us to strive for success, security, and the fulfillment of external goals that are often defined by others. However, Camus argues that this is exactly where the absurdity of life lies. When we live our lives based on external expectations, we relinquish our agency and our ability to define our own meaning. The true rebellion, according to Camus, lies in rejecting these external pressures and living in accordance with one's own values and desires, even in the face of life's meaninglessness. One of the most significant aspects of this rebellion is the refusal to submit to nihilism. Many individuals, upon confronting the meaninglessness of existence, might be tempted to surrender to despair, convinced that life is not worth living. Camus, however, suggests that this is not the only option. Rebellion against the absurd does not mean rejecting life altogether, but rather accepting its futility and choosing to live authentically despite it. In his view, the very act of continuing to live, in full awareness of the absurdity of existence, is an act of defiance. It is a declaration that, while life may not have an inherent purpose, we still have the power to create our own meaning. This idea of rebellion is vividly illustrated in the lives of many artists, writers, and individuals who have lived outside the norms of society. These are the people who refuse to conform to conventional ideas of success and meaning. Take, for example, the poet Charles Bukowski, whose raw, unflinching depictions of life on the margins of society challenge traditional ideas of what constitutes a meaningful existence. Bukowski's life and work are an embodiment of Camus' philosophy. He rejected the conventional pursuit of wealth, status, and social acceptance in favor of living authentically, embracing the messy, often painful reality of life. His writing is filled with themes of rebellion against societal expectations, and his life is a testament to the idea that, even in the face of a world that offers no inherent meaning, it is possible to create one's own purpose. Similarly, the work of Franz Kafka resonates with Camus' rebellious spirit. Kafka's writing often explores themes of alienation, bureaucracy, and the absurdity of life, with his most famous work, The Trial, offering a stark portrayal of an individual caught in a meaningless and oppressive system. The protagonist, Joseph K., struggles against a faceless, implacable authority that seems to offer no purpose or explanation. Despite the futility of his efforts, Joseph K. continues to fight against the absurdity of his situation, making him an archetype of the rebellious spirit Camus describes. Kafka's characters, like Camus' Sisyphus, are trapped in absurd situations, yet they continue to act, to rebel, even when it seems futile. This relentless pursuit of action in the face of meaninglessness is the essence of Camus' concept of rebellion. Another powerful example of rebellion against the absurd can be found in the life of Simone de Beauvoir, a key figure in existentialist thought. In her personal and intellectual life, de Beauvoir rejected the conventional expectations placed on women in her time. She defied societal norms regarding gender, marriage, and family, choosing instead to live according to her own principles and desires. De Beauvoir's rejection of societal pressures, her pursuit of intellectual and personal freedom, and her insistence on living authentically are all in alignment with Camus' call for rebellion against the absurd. Her life and work serve as a reminder that rebellion is not simply about rejecting external structures of meaning, but about embracing the freedom to define one's own purpose and existence. In the realm of art, the rebellious spirit of Camus is also reflected in the work of musicians such as Bob Dylan, who defied expectations about what popular music could or should be. Dylan's music challenged conventional ideas about the role of the artist in society, and his lyrics often conveyed themes of rebellion, individualism, and the search for authenticity. By refusing to conform to the expectations of the music industry and creating work that reflected his own vision and experiences, Dylan embodied the defiant spirit that Camus advocated. His refusal to fit into a mold, his constant evolution as an artist, and his commitment to authenticity reflect the core of Camus' rebellious spirit. The concept of rebellion, as Camus describes it, can also be applied to everyday life. Many individuals, in small or large ways, engage in acts of rebellion against the expectations placed on them by society. These might be the people who choose non-traditional career paths, who prioritize personal fulfillment over financial success, or who live in ways that defy social norms. Their rebellion is not against the world itself, but against the constraints that the world imposes on them. By living authentically, they create their own meaning and purpose, even in a world that offers none. In this sense, rebellion is not about resistance for its own sake, but about affirming life and individuality in a universe that seems indifferent to both. Ultimately, Camus' call to rebellion is not about rejecting life or rejecting the absurd, but about fully embracing it. It is about recognizing the futility of the search for objective meaning while still choosing to live and act in a way that is true to oneself. This rebellion is a celebration of human freedom, the freedom to create one's own meaning and to live authentically in the face of an indifferent universe. The rebellious spirit, as Camus envisions it, is an act of defiance not against life itself, but against the idea that life must have an external, predetermined purpose. Instead, the individual embraces the absurd and continues to live fully, creating their own meaning along the way. In this way, rebellion becomes not an act of resistance, but an affirmation of existence itself. In the face of life's inherent meaninglessness, Albert Camus presents an empowering idea. We are not doomed to live lives of despair simply because the universe offers no inherent purpose. Instead, Camus proposes that we, as individuals, have the ability to create our own meaning in an otherwise indifferent world. This concept is central to his philosophy and serves as a powerful call to action. Rather than surrendering to the void or succumbing to the belief that life is meaningless, Camus urges us to create our own purpose through our choices, actions, and relationships. It's a philosophy that invites us to take the absurdity of existence not as a burden, but as an opportunity for personal agency and creative expression. For Camus, the absurd is not an obstacle to meaning. Rather, it is the condition within which we must create our own meaning. The universe may be indifferent to our existence, but this very indifference gives us the freedom to define our own lives, to set our own values, and to live according to our personal understanding of what matters. This is where the real power of Camus' philosophy lies. He does not ask us to search for a predetermined, objective meaning that may never materialize. Instead, he encourages us to generate meaning through our own experiences and actions. One of the most significant ways in which Camus suggests we can create meaning in an absurd world is through our relationships. Relationships with others offer us the opportunity to forge connections, to love, and to be loved experiences that can bring deep satisfaction and fulfillment. Even in a world that may seem devoid of purpose, in the absence of external meaning, it is the bonds we create with others that can give our lives significance. The love we share with friends, family, and partners can become a source of profound meaning. In the shared experiences of joy, suffering, and everything in between, we find a purpose that transcends the individual and ties us to something greater than ourselves. Take, for example, the bond between a parent and child. In many ways, the love between parent and child can be seen as an act of creation, something that is not imposed upon the parent by any external force, but something that emerges from the relationship itself. The act of raising a child, caring for them, and watching them grow provide a sense of purpose and meaning that is deeply personal and unique to the individual. Despite the inherent meaninglessness of existence, the relationship between parent and child provides a form of fulfillment that goes beyond the abstract and into the realm of lived experience. In this sense, relationships are not just a source of emotional connection. They're a way to actively create meaning in a world that might otherwise feel devoid of it. Another area where Camus suggests we can create meaning is through our personal passions and hobbies. In a world where nothing is inherently meaningful, the pursuit of personal interests becomes an act of rebellion against the absurd. Whether it's painting, writing, playing music, or any other form of creative expression, these activities allow us to assert our individuality and create meaning through our own actions. The act of creating something, whether it's a painting, a novel, a song, or even a meal, becomes a way of imbuing the world with purpose. Consider the life of an artist, someone who paints not because they're compelled by a higher purpose, but because they find meaning in the process of creation itself. The artist may not know if their work will ever be recognized or if it will have any lasting significance, but that does not matter. What matters is the act of creation, the act of bringing something into existence. This process is what provides meaning, not because the work will be immortalized, but because the artist has chosen to create it in the first place. In this way, personal passions become a vehicle for meaning, allowing us to craft purpose in an otherwise meaningless world. Similarly, writing offers another avenue for individuals to create meaning. Writers often put pen to paper not because they believe their words will change the world, but because writing allows them to explore their thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Whether the writing is a personal journal, a work of fiction, or an article on a specific topic, the act of writing can become a form of self-expression and self-understanding. Through writing, individuals can give voice to their inner thoughts, process their emotions, and communicate with others in a way that feels deeply authentic. In a world where external meaning is elusive, writing offers an intimate way of creating personal purpose, of shaping one's own understanding of the world and sharing it with others. Camus also encourages us to create meaning through our everyday actions, not just through extraordinary achievements or grand gestures. In his view, life's meaning is not found in monumental acts or in the pursuit of some grand, universal goal, but in the small, everyday choices we make. The way we choose to live each day, the way we interact with others, and the way we engage with the world around us are all ways of creating meaning. By living authentically, by choosing to act with integrity, kindness, and honesty, we give our lives significance, even if that significance is not recognized or validated by society at large. An example of this can be seen in the life of a teacher. A teacher's work is often not acknowledged in the same way as that of a CEO or a celebrity. Yet the impact they have on their students' lives can be profound. A teacher who genuinely cares about their students, who takes the time to engage with them, to encourage them, and to help them grow, creates meaning through their everyday interactions. The teacher's work may not have the same immediate recognition as that of a more prestigious profession, but the meaning they create is no less real. By living in a way that reflects their values, the teacher adds purpose to their own life and to the lives of others. In this sense, it is the act of living with intention and authenticity that generates meaning in a world that might otherwise feel meaningless. Camus' call to create meaning in the absurd is not a passive acceptance of life's lack of purpose. It is an active engagement with the world. It is about taking ownership of our existence and asserting our will in the face of an indifferent universe. Whether through relationships, creative pursuits, or the small acts of everyday life, we have the power to create meaning for ourselves. This philosophy allows us to find purpose in the very process of living, not because life is inherently meaningful, but because we make it meaningful through our choices and actions. In a world that offers no guarantees, the freedom to create our own meaning is perhaps the most significant freedom we can claim. For example, consider the story of someone who chooses to volunteer their time at a local shelter. They may not be motivated by the expectation of recognition or reward, but by the deep sense of fulfillment that comes from helping others. Through their actions, They're creating meaning not just for themselves, but for the people they help. In a world that offers no objective meaning, this simple act of kindness becomes a powerful source of purpose. It is through these small, everyday choices that we can create a life that feels meaningful, regardless of what the universe itself provides. Ultimately, Camus teaches us that meaning is not something we discover or uncover, it is something we create. In a world that offers no inherent purpose, we have the freedom to choose what gives our lives value. Whether through our relationships, our passions, or our everyday actions, we have the power to create meaning in a world that might otherwise feel devoid of it. The absurdity of life does not negate the possibility of living a life filled with purpose. It simply challenges us to create that purpose ourselves. It is in this act of creation that we find freedom, and in that freedom, we find meaning. Living in the face of the absurd is a concept that Albert Camus addresses with great depth in his philosophy. The idea is not just about acknowledging that life is inherently meaningless, but about embracing that very realization and using it as a foundation for living fully in the present moment. Camus rejects the idea that we need to find some grand, ultimate purpose to validate our existence. Instead, he suggests that we can create meaning in the most fundamental way by accepting the absurd and choosing to live joyfully, with full awareness of the world's indifference to our efforts. The acceptance of the absurd does not mean resigning oneself to despair. On the contrary, Camus argues that recognizing life's lack of inherent meaning actually opens the door to a richer, more authentic existence. It allows us to free ourselves from the burdens of expectation, from the pressure to search for an external or predetermined purpose. In the face of absurdity, we are liberated to focus on the present moment, to experience life for what it is, without the need for it to fit into a larger narrative. By fully accepting the absurd, we are freed to find beauty in the simplest experiences, to take joy in the fleeting moments that make up our lives. This concept of embracing the absurd and finding joy in life despite its meaninglessness is crucial to Camus' worldview. It is in the face of life's inherent absurdity that we can truly appreciate the beauty of existence. The very fact that life is temporary, fragile, and unpredictable gives it a unique value. Camus writes about this in The Myth of Sisyphus, where he suggests that one must imagine Sisyphus, the character condemned to endlessly push a boulder up a hill, as happy. The struggle itself, the conscious choice to live despite the absurdity, is where the meaning lies. In this sense, the struggle to find meaning becomes the meaning itself. By accepting the futility of Sisyphus' task, we are reminded that the beauty of life is not in the ultimate destination or in some grand cosmic purpose, but in the effort itself, in the living of life as it is. In our own lives, this idea can be applied to how we approach adversity, loss, and the everyday challenges that we all face. Life is, after all, a series of moments, some joyful, some painful, and by accepting that these moments are fleeting and without ultimate purpose, we can embrace them more fully. There is something profoundly liberating in knowing that we don't have to find justification for our existence beyond the simple act of living it. For example, think about people who face terminal illnesses. The diagnosis might strip away any illusions of future plans or grand achievements. Yet many of those individuals go on to live their remaining days with a depth of joy and purpose that transcends the conventional search for meaning. Consider someone like Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who found immense meaning in the midst of suffering. Frankl, who wrote about his experiences in his famous work Man's Search for Meaning, describes how he was able to endure the atrocities of the concentration camps by focusing on the present moment. Frankl realized that, even in the most extreme circumstances, he could choose how to respond to his situation. This choice, he argued, was where meaning could be found, even when everything external had been taken away from him, including his family, his career, In his freedom, Frankl maintained that finding purpose was still possible. The joy he found came not from some eventual reward or from the belief that his suffering had a larger cosmic purpose, but from the small, everyday decisions he made to live with dignity and to find meaning in each moment. Similarly, there are countless stories of people who, despite facing overwhelming adversity, continue to find joy in the simplest aspects of life. For example, a person diagnosed with a terminal illness might find joy in a walk through the park or in a conversation with a loved one. They may no longer be focused on the pursuit of success or long-term goals, but instead, they might discover that the fleeting moments of connection, the small acts of kindness, and the beauty of the natural world offer a profound sense of meaning. This is the essence of living in the face of the absurd. It's about finding joy not in a future promise, but in the present, in the experiences that unfold around us every day. Take, for instance, the example of someone who has lost their job or is struggling financially. The world often teaches us that success, wealth, and material accomplishment are the markers of a meaningful life. However, people who experience such hardships often discover that meaning is not derived from external circumstances, but from how they choose to live in the moment. They may find purpose in their relationships, in helping others, or in the simple pleasures of daily life. By accepting that life's meaning is not tied to external achievements, they are able to experience joy in the midst of struggle, finding significance in the way they engage with life as it is. This principle can also be observed in the lives of artists, musicians, and creators who face obstacles such as rejection, failure, or a lack of recognition. These individuals, instead of giving up or becoming consumed by the idea that their work must have ultimate significance, continue to create. The joy they find is not dependent on external validation or success, but in the act of creation itself. For them, the process of making something, whether it's a painting, a song, or a novel, is where the meaning resides. They continue to create, not because they believe their work will be immortalized, but because the act of creating gives them a sense of purpose and satisfaction. This is living in the face of the absurd. It's about engaging with life as it is, without the need for it to fit into a larger narrative of success or purpose. Camus' philosophy also invites us to consider the beauty and fragility of life. When we accept that life is finite and that there is no ultimate meaning waiting for us at the end, we are better able to appreciate the small, everyday moments that make life worth living. The fleeting beauty of a sunset, the laughter of a friend, the satisfaction of a job well done. These are the moments that, when fully embraced, offer meaning in a world that may otherwise seem devoid of it. The fragility of life, the knowledge that it could end at any moment, makes these moments all the more precious. In the face of the absurd, it is this appreciation for the present moment that becomes a form of rebellion, a choice to live fully, without the need for ultimate justification. Consider the story of an elderly person who has lived a full life. Yet as they near the end, they find themselves reflecting not on grand achievements, but on the simple pleasures they've experienced. Perhaps they look back on the time spent with family, the conversations that stretched late into the night, the meals shared, the laughter and tears. These moments, though they may seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, provide a deep sense of fulfillment. They're the moments where meaning is created, not because of their inherent importance, but because of the way they were lived. In this sense, life's meaning is found in the quality of our experiences, not in their external value. Living in the face of the absurd requires a shift in perspective, a choice to embrace life for what it is, without the need for it to conform to some preconceived notion of success or purpose. It's about finding joy in the simple act of living, in the fleeting moments that make up our days. When we accept that life is meaningless, we are free to live authentically, without the weight of expectation. This freedom allows us to experience life in a more profound way, finding meaning not in the future, but in the present. It is in this acceptance of life's impermanence and absurdity that we can discover the true beauty of existence. Albert Camus' philosophy, though written in the early 20th century, remains remarkably relevant in today's world. As we navigate the complexities of the modern era, marked by rapid technological advancements, global connectivity, and a persistent sense of existential unease, Camus' ideas offer a compelling framework for understanding the struggles individuals face in finding meaning and purpose in an increasingly fragmented world. In particular, his exploration of the absurd and the freedom found in accepting life's inherent meaninglessness speaks directly to the anxieties many face today. The world we live in today is one where external pressures to succeed, conform, and find purpose are more pronounced than ever. Whether it's the relentless pace of social media, the pressure to achieve material success, or the constant bombardment of expectations from society, many individuals feel trapped in a cycle of perpetual striving, searching for meaning in a world that offers no definitive answers. This can lead to a deep sense of existential anxiety, a feeling that we are disconnected from the world around us and that our efforts to find purpose are futile. In this context, Camus' philosophy is more than just a relic of philosophical thought. It is a timeless message that speaks directly to the struggles and dilemmas of modern life. One of the key aspects of Camus' philosophy that resonates with the modern world is his emphasis on the absurd. The inherent conflict between the human desire for meaning and the universe's indifference to our need for purpose. In today's fast-paced, interconnected society, people often feel a pressure to constantly search for answers, to define their identity, and to justify their existence through achievements, relationships, and external validation. This desire for meaning can become overwhelming, especially when the world seems to offer no concrete answers. The more we search for purpose, the more we seem to encounter the realization that there is none. This dissonance between our internal need for meaning and the lack of it in the external world can create a sense of isolation and frustration. Camus' solution to this dilemma is not to give in to despair or nihilism, but to embrace the absurd. In his view, the recognition that life is inherently meaningless is not something to fear, but something to accept. Once we accept the absurdity of existence, we are freed from the need to search for an overarching, external meaning. Instead, we can create our own meaning through our actions, relationships, and choices. In this sense, Camus' philosophy is one of personal freedom. It allows us to define our lives on our own terms, free from the constraints of societal expectations or the pressure to live up to some predefined purpose. In the modern world, where mental health challenges are becoming more widespread and existential questions are more prevalent, Camus' emphasis on personal freedom and self-determination offers a liberating message. Today, many people feel overwhelmed by the expectations placed on them, whether it's the pressure to be constantly productive, to conform to social norms, or to find happiness and fulfillment through external means. These pressures can lead to anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of emptiness. Camus' philosophy, however, encourages us to step back from these external demands and recognize that we are not obligated to find meaning in the traditional sense. Instead, we can embrace the absurd and choose to live authentically, creating meaning in the present moment. For instance, consider the modern obsession with success and achievement. In many cultures, success is often defined in terms of material wealth, professional accomplishments, or societal status. The constant striving to attain these markers of success can lead to burnout, dissatisfaction, and feelings of inadequacy. Camus, however, would suggest that this search for external validation is itself part of the absurd. Rather than striving to meet society's expectations, we should focus on living authentically, engaging with life as it is, without the need for grand external achievements. This is not to say that success is meaningless, but rather that it should not be the sole measure of one's worth. In a world that often equates success with happiness, Camus encourages us to find joy in the process of living itself, rather than in the accumulation of achievements. The impact of social media on modern society is another example where Camus ideas can be applied. In the age of Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, the pressure to present a curated version of one's life is overwhelming. Many people measure their self-worth by the number of likes, followers, or comments they receive, creating a sense of validation based on external recognition. This can lead to a deep sense of inadequacy and self-doubt, especially when one's online persona does not align with their true self. Camus' philosophy offers a way out of this trap. By accepting the absurdity of life and letting go of the need for external validation, we can find freedom from the pressures of social media. We can live more authentically, focusing on real-life experiences and connections rather than seeking validation from an often superficial online world. Camus also addresses the broader issue of existential crisis, which has become increasingly prevalent in the modern world. In a society that places a premium on constant progress and success, many individuals struggle to find meaning and purpose when their lives don't follow a traditional path or when they experience setbacks and failures. For those who experience an existential crisis, whether triggered by a personal loss, a career setback, or a general sense of disillusionment, Camus' philosophy provides a way to navigate these challenges. Rather than searching for meaning in an objective sense, Camus urges individuals to find meaning within themselves. This internal search for meaning is not about grand discoveries or achieving a sense of cosmic purpose, but about embracing life as it is, with all its contradictions and absurdities. In practical terms, this means that, in the face of adversity, we can find joy and purpose not by striving for unattainable ideals, but by fully engaging with the present moment. The absurd is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be confronted and accepted. It is through this acceptance that we can truly begin to live authentically, free from the burden of trying to meet external expectations or follow a prescribed path. This philosophy encourages people to create their own purpose by engaging deeply with the world around them, whether it be through personal relationships, creative pursuits, or everyday acts of kindness and compassion. Another way Camus' philosophy applies to modern life is in its emphasis on personal freedom. In today's world, many people feel constrained by societal norms, career expectations, or the pressure to conform to certain lifestyles. Camus' view of freedom is one where individuals are free to make their own choices, free from the need for external validation. This concept of freedom is liberating, especially in a world that often feels rigid and demanding. It allows individuals to define their own lives, to make choices that align with their values and desires, and to live in a way that is true to themselves. In a sense, Camus' philosophy provides a roadmap for navigating modern life's complexities, giving individuals the tools to embrace uncertainty, create their own meaning, and live with purpose, even in the face of an indifferent world. In conclusion, Camus' philosophy has undeniable relevance in the modern world. As we face the anxieties and uncertainties of contemporary life, his ideas offer a way to embrace the absurd and find freedom in the face of meaninglessness. In a world that often pressures us to conform, to succeed, and to find purpose in external achievements, Camus encourages us to focus inward, to live authentically, and to create meaning through our own actions and choices. His philosophy challenges us to confront life as it is, without the need for grand answers, and to find joy in the very process of living. This timeless message provides a powerful antidote to the existential anxieties of our time, encouraging us to live fully and freely in a world that offers no definitive answers. As I reflect on Albert Camus' philosophy of the absurd, I'm struck by how profoundly it resonates with the challenges and experiences we face in our modern world. Camus teaches us that life, in its essence, is inherently meaningless, and that the search for an objective, universal purpose will ultimately lead us to encounter the absurd. But rather than succumb to despair, Camus proposes that we can embrace this very absurdity, and in doing so, create our own meaning through the choices we make and the way we live. In my own life, I've found that Camus' perspective is not only a powerful lens through which to view existence, but also a guide for finding fulfillment in the face of life's inherent uncertainty. I can recall a time in my own life when I grappled with feelings of emptiness and disillusionment. As a young adult, I was conditioned to believe that success and fulfillment could be found in external achievements, getting the right job, building a career, gaining recognition, and accumulating wealth. I remember thinking that if I achieved these things, I would finally be happy and fulfilled. But after reaching some of these goals, I found that they did not provide the deep sense of satisfaction I had expected. I had followed a prescribed path, believing it would lead to fulfillment, only to realize that these accomplishments did not bring lasting meaning. This was my first encounter with what Camus would describe as the absurd, the realization that there was no ultimate purpose, no grand narrative that could justify my existence. I felt as though I had reached the top of a mountain only to find there was no peak to stand on, just an empty space. It was in this moment of crisis that I first turned to Camus' philosophy. Rather than wallowing in despair or seeking comfort in false hopes, I began to confront the absurdity of life head-on. I realized that life didn't need to have some grand, external meaning to be valuable. In fact, by accepting the absurdity of existence, I was freed from the weight of trying to find some predefined purpose. Instead of searching for meaning in external achievements, I began to look inward, focusing on the things that brought me joy and fulfillment in the present moment. This shift in perspective allowed me to embrace life as it was, rather than constantly seeking a future that would somehow provide answers. I started to find meaning in the small, everyday moments, connecting with friends and family, engaging in creative pursuits, and experiencing the beauty of the world around me. I found joy not in the distant promise of success, but in the simple act of living. This is something Camus emphasizes in his philosophy, the idea that meaning is not something to be found, but something to be created. And it is through our actions, our relationships, and our experiences that we find purpose, even in a world that offers no inherent meaning. For example, one of the most meaningful experiences I had during this time was rediscovering my love for writing. I had always enjoyed writing, but it had become something I put aside in favor of pursuing a more practical career. When I began to embrace the absurd, I realized that writing did not need to have any grand purpose. It didn't matter if my work was published or if it gained recognition. The act of writing itself became my way of creating meaning. I began to write not because I expected fame or validation, but because it allowed me to express myself authentically, to explore my thoughts and emotions, and to engage with the world in a way that felt deeply personal. Writing became a form of rebellion against the absurd way of affirming my existence despite the world's indifference. In the same way, I found that my relationships with others took on a new depth. I began to value the moments of connection with friends and family not because they were part of some larger plan, but because they were meaningful in themselves. Conversations, shared experiences, and even the simple act of being present with others became sources of fulfillment. I realized that these relationships were not just means to an end, but were valuable in their own right. By embracing the absurd, I was able to appreciate the fleeting beauty of life and the connections that make it worth living. Another way Camus' philosophy has influenced my life is in how I approach challenges and setbacks. In the face of difficulty, it is easy to fall into despair, to feel as though life is unfair or that the struggle is pointless. But Camus teaches us that this struggle is not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced. The act of living authentically, despite life's inherent meaninglessness, is what gives life its significance. I have learned to approach challenges not as obstacles to be overcome, but as opportunities to engage with life on a deeper level. Whether it's a difficult project at work, a personal loss, or a period of uncertainty, I now view these struggles as part of the human experience, not as something to escape. In accepting the absurd, I have found that I am more resilient in the face of adversity because I no longer expect life to be fair or predictable. Instead, I focus on how I can live fully in each moment, regardless of the circumstances. I think of an example from my own experience when I faced a significant career setback. After working for years to build a particular career path, I was unexpectedly let go from my job. At first, I felt lost and uncertain, as though all the work I had put into this career had been in vain. It seemed absurd that everything I had worked for could come to such an abrupt end. But rather than giving in to despair, I turned to Camus' idea of rebellion. I realized that this moment, as painful as it was, did not have to define my entire life. I chose to see this setback not as a failure, but as an opportunity to create meaning in a new direction. I didn't need to follow the path I had once believed was the only one for me. I began to explore other passions and interests, engaging in creative projects and personal growth. By embracing the absurd, I found the freedom to redefine my purpose and create a new path forward. In these personal reflections, I see how Camus' philosophy encourages us to live authentically, to create meaning where there is none, and to find joy in the process of living itself. Embracing the absurd does not mean resigning ourselves to a life of despair, but rather choosing to live fully in the face of life's inherent meaninglessness. It means finding joy in the small moments, creating meaning through our actions, and focusing on the present rather than constantly striving for something that may never come. This philosophy has not only helped me navigate difficult moments, but has also enriched my everyday experiences, allowing me to find meaning and fulfillment in places I might have otherwise overlooked. The beauty of Camus' philosophy lies in its simplicity and its capacity to empower us to live with purpose, even when that purpose is not dictated by some external source. By accepting the absurd, we are free to create our own meaning in life, to live fully, and to appreciate the fleeting moments that make life worth living. In this way, Camus' philosophy is not just an intellectual exercise, but a way of life, one that invites us to live authentically, to embrace the challenges, and to find joy in the very act of living. Through this perspective, we can not only survive, but thrive, despite the uncertainty and meaninglessness that the world may present. Camus' philosophy centers on the absurd, this clash between the human desire for meaning and the cold indifference of the universe. What makes Camus' perspective powerful is that he doesn't encourage resignation to despair, but rather an embrace of life in its fullest, despite its inherent lack of purpose. His main argument is that life is not endowed with an ultimate, objective meaning, but we have the power to create our own meaning through the choices we make and the ways we engage with the world. In essence, Camus suggests that while life is absurd, it is also liberating. We are free to define our existence without being burdened by external expectations or predefined purposes. Camus posits that the recognition of life's absurdity doesn't need to lead to despair or nihilism. Rather, it can lead to liberation. He argues that we, as individuals, can rebel against the absurd by continuing to live authentically, by choosing to find joy, purpose, and meaning in the everyday experiences we have. He presents the image of Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, as a symbol of this rebellion. Though Sisyphus's task is pointless, Camus famously suggests that one must imagine Sisyphus happy, because in his struggle, he is living authentically, fully aware of his fate, but continuing to push the rock nonetheless. This metaphor encapsulates Camus' entire philosophy. Life is meaningless, yet it is our engagement with it, our rebellion against the absurd, that makes life worth living. The message Camus offers is clear. life does not need to follow any particular path, nor does it require an overarching narrative to justify its existence. The search for meaning in a larger, cosmic sense is futile, but that does not make our individual lives any less significant. It is through personal freedom, choice, and authenticity that we create meaning for ourselves. When we stop waiting for a grand purpose to appear and instead focus on how we engage with the world, we discover that meaning can be made in the smallest of moments. It is in how we love, create, act, and experience life that we find our own purpose. One of the most significant aspects of Camus philosophy is the call to live authentically. In a world that often pressures us to conform to societal expectations or to pursue success as defined by external standards, Camus urges us to step away from these conventions and to live based on our true selves. Authenticity is the key to navigating the absurd. When we live in accordance with our own values, passions, and desires, we rebel against the societal forces that try to impose meaning on us. The freedom to define our own purpose is not a burden, but a gift, a way to experience life fully, despite its absurdity. In the modern world, where many people struggle with feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and existential doubt, Camus philosophy offers a sense of relief and hope. Instead of succumbing to despair or feeling lost in a world that doesn't provide answers, we can find comfort in the idea that we are free to create our own meaning. Life's value doesn't need to be justified by some universal goal. It can be meaningful because we choose to make it so. Whether through our work, our relationships, or our personal passions, we have the ability to create purpose in our lives. Consider the simple example of an artist. An artist may paint not because they hope to become famous or wealthy, but because the act of painting itself gives them meaning. They create something from nothing. They express their thoughts, feelings, and perceptions through their art. This process, though it may not change the world or have lasting significance, still provides the artist with a sense of fulfillment. The artist's rebellion against the absurd lies not in striving for fame, but in their refusal to let life's meaninglessness prevent them from creating. By choosing to create something, even in the face of a universe that does not care, they assert their own meaning and purpose. The same applies to writers, musicians, and any individual who creates or acts from a place of authenticity. Living authentically also means finding joy in the small moments of life. Camus philosophy does not encourage us to ignore life's challenges or hardships, but to embrace them as part of the human experience. The recognition that life is fleeting, that every moment is temporary, makes each moment all the more precious. Whether it's a conversation with a loved one, a walk in the park, or the feeling of accomplishment after completing a project, these seemingly small moments are where meaning can be found. The key is to experience these moments fully, without waiting for a larger, more profound meaning to emerge. Camus teaches us that the beauty of life is not found in waiting for something greater, but in embracing the present and making the most of each fleeting moment. Moreover, Camus emphasizes the importance of personal freedom. In a world where we are often constrained by the expectations of others, whether they come from society, family, or work, Camus encourages us to assert our freedom to live as we choose. This freedom is a powerful tool for overcoming the absurd, as it allows us to engage with life on our terms, rather than conforming to the external pressures that try to shape our reality. It is through this freedom that we can truly live authentically, pursuing the things that bring us joy and fulfillment, without the burden of needing to justify our choices to anyone else. The absurd is not a reason to retreat from life, but a reason to dive deeper into it. By recognizing that life has no inherent meaning, we're freed from the pressure of trying to find some grand purpose. Instead, we can find satisfaction in the process of living itself. We can create meaning through our actions, relationships, and experiences, knowing that we are not bound by any universal narrative or cosmic plan. Life is what we make of it, and by living authentically and embracing the absurd, we can find purpose and joy even in a world that offers no answers. In many ways, Camus philosophy is a call to action. It encourages us to stop waiting for life to reveal its meaning and instead take responsibility for creating meaning in our own lives. Whether it's through the work we do, the relationships we cultivate, or the creative endeavors we pursue, we can shape our lives in a way that is fulfilling and authentic. The freedom to define our own meaning is both a challenge and a gift. In a world that may not offer any inherent purpose, we have the power to create our own purpose, and in doing so, we affirm the value of our existence. As we navigate the complexities and uncertainties of the modern world, Camus' ideas provide a powerful framework for finding meaning and purpose. His call to embrace the absurd and live authentically is not just a philosophical stance, but a practical guide for living in a world that often seems devoid of clear answers. By accepting the absurd, we free ourselves from a need for external validation and begin to find joy and fulfillment in the small moments that make up our lives. In this way, Camus philosophy offers both solace and empowerment, encouraging us to live fully and authentically, regardless of life's inherent meaninglessness. So where does that leave us? According to Camus, the key to navigating life's absurdity isn't finding a grand purpose or achieving ultimate success. It's about accepting the absurd and, in doing so, embracing life with all of its uncertainties. Life doesn't have to have a fixed meaning for it to be worthwhile. By living authentically, creating meaning from within, and experiencing the present moment, we can find joy and fulfillment even in a world that offers no clear answers. Whether it's through our relationships, our creative endeavors, or the simple joys of everyday life, Camus teaches us that meaning is something we can create, not something we discover externally. The very act of living authentically, despite life's inherent meaninglessness, is itself an act of rebellion, a rebellion against the pressures and expectations that society places on us to conform, to achieve, and to find validation in external success. So, what's the next step for you? How will you embrace the absurd in your own life? What meaning will you create, starting today? Remember, life is a series of moments that we define, not something that is handed to us. By accepting the absurd, we free ourselves from the weight of searching for answers and instead find peace in simply living authentically. If you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Your support helps us keep bringing you videos that dive deep into the big questions of life. And if this video resonated with you, please consider supporting us with a super thanks. Your contribution means the world to us, and it allows us to keep creating meaningful, engaging content that sparks conversations like this one. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Camus philosophy. Keep questioning, keep living authentically, and remember, life may be absurd, but it's also beautiful. See you in the next video.